Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Commissioner John O'Grady from Franklin County. Welcome to the courthouse. Glad to have everybody here today. A special welcome, obviously, to Intergovernmental Affairs Director Tom Perez from the White House. Obviously, want to welcome my good friend Mayor Andy Ginther. We like to call him the best mayor in America, but that's a little difficult since we have so many mayors in the room today. I'd like to introduce elected officials, but in particular the mayors that are in the room. Well, hello. And I know I saw my mayor, my good friend and former gentleman I served with years ago, but I know Mayor Dan Horgan's here from Akron. I know we have other mayors that I recognize, but I don't know where everybody's from. So if you are either an elected official or a mayor, if you could stand, please. I know Dan's here. All right. Now, see, I did all this. We have our minority leader of the Ohio House here, but now, Mayor, I got myself in trouble, and I don't know all of these mayors, so I'm in trouble here. So let me have everybody introduce themselves.
Mayor Sharif Smith-Lima.
Gotcha.
Frank Winfield, Larry, Ohio.
Minority leader of the Ohio House, Allison Russo.
State Representative Ishmael Mohammed, 3rd District.
Thank you.
Jack Bradley, Mayor of Lorain, Ohio.
Mayor.
Benjamin Hobart, Mayor of the Village of Woodmere.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, Mayor Ginther's with us. And our former state representative, Representative Kent, Kathleen Clyde. I'm sorry, Kathleen, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Commissioner.
Good to see you. All right, so thank you, everybody, for being here. I know Mayor Piraval from Cincinnati is expected to be here later this afternoon as well. So the Biden-Harris administration is making good on its promise to invest in America and Americans with historic legislation like the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Infrastructure Reduction Act. And the effects of all of those are being felt throughout the country, and especially here in Franklin County. Central Ohio is growing faster now than at any time in living memory, and we're working hard with our partners in Washington to meet the challenges that come with that growth, including by investing to create good-paying jobs for all of our residents. My colleagues and I were pleased this morning to welcome Director Perez on a tour of one of our Building Futures sites with Iron Workers Local 172. Building Futures is a counting program that partners with the building trades and local nonprofits to prepare low-income residents for middle-class careers in the skilled building trades. We were joined this morning by our great friends, the folks that have helped us create this program, President Nana Watson of the NAACP. She's been a huge champion. Thank you, President Watson. There's been by the way, there's been no bigger champion of that program in Central Ohio than Nana Watson. Our CEO of the organization, Leland Bass, and Dorsey Hager from from AFL-CIO, with the AFL-CIO. Local governments couldn't ask for a better partner than President Biden, and Director Perez is here to highlight the administration's investment in local communities and to learn from Franklin County residents about the issues that are facing their families. But first, it's my pleasure to announce our next speaker, Sarah Gwynn May. Sarah is an iron worker from Cincinnati, and she's got a powerful story about how her job in the trades has helped her build her family's future as she helped to build the infrastructure that we all rely on. Welcome, Sarah, and thank you for being here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Gwynn May. I stand before you a proud mother, wife, and union iron worker, and newly elected political coordinator of Local 44. I've been a member of Iron Workers for 34 years. Long time, 34 years. 14 of the years I dedicated to the company's CHC fabrication. When I first became a union iron worker, I knew nothing about the craft. They taught me everything that I needed to know. I heard that the benefits was wonderful and the pay would help me raise my family, take care of my family. So I said, okay, cool, I'll become an iron worker. And 34 years later, here I stand. I've been able to turn this job into a career and learn and build things that I never dreamed possible. It has given me the opportunity to stand up for equality for women and diversity in the trades. But today, I have been given the opportunity to introduce to you all Mr. Tony Perez. Tony Perez serves as a senior advisor and assistant to the president and the director of the White House Office of Internal Governmental Affairs. Perez brings decades of local, state, and federal experience to the White House, having served as a former Montgomery County, Maryland Council member, as Secretary of Maryland's Department of Labor, as Assistant Attorney General of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice, as a Director of the Office of Civil Rights at the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and as Secretary of the Labor under President Obama. Without further waiting, I introduce to you Director Tony Perez.
Hey, how are you? You're great. Let's give it up for Sarah. Sarah, thank you. Thanks for setting such a wonderful example. I'm still dwelling on your 34 years of service, and I remind you that as your former labor secretary, I enforce child labor laws. And I'm doing the math, and I'm a little concerned that in your initial employment, we might have had a labor law violation, but the good news is there's a statute of limitations. So nobody's in trouble. Thank you for the great example you spent. You know, the Brent Spence Bridge, a lot of people talked about building it. There's one president who's building it, and that's Joe Biden. And that's a big deal. And we're so excited to be welcoming the mayor down there in a little while. Thanks so much. And thank you to all of you for showing up. I am a former local elected official. I worked in state government and local government. You know, you can't print money, Mayor, as you know. You got to solve problems. And the way you solve problems is by working together in partnership. And I think it's really important, and I mentioned this morning, and again, thank you, President Watson, for your tireless leadership. You and Joyce Beatty, partners in what John Lewis would call good trouble, have been doing so much for that for so long. And that gentleman to your left has been a real leader in that. So, you know, it's really important to know the moment in time that we are living in. Yes, this is a moment of many grave threats to our democracy. We survived a pandemic. And it's a moment of unprecedented opportunity. We will never in our lifetimes have more investment in local communities than we have had under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Period. Hard stop. That is the reality. And you have taken such remarkable advantage of that. And I want to, first of all, start out by saying thank you for your partnership. There is not a president who I believe has done more for county and city governments than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They put their money where their mouth was. And we got to see the fruits of those investments today. I was so inspired, Leland, to be visiting your site there because, you know, when you look at Local 172 today and what we did, when we were looking at the Building Futures program, Building Futures is about working with folks who have incredible gifts and talents. But their life's path has not been linear. And I said earlier today, you know, I have an ambivalent relationship with the term second chance because it implies that you had a fair first chance. And there are so many people who didn't have that fair first shake. I met one of them today, Charles. who, had some stuff happen in his life. He took the wrong path. But for the grace of God, could have gone any of us. And you know what? Because of this investment in building futures, he's been there 5 years. He's a journey person now. He's making real money. He's punched his ticket to the middle class, and he's inspiring others to come. You leveraged ARPA funds to build a program, and thank you for your leadership, sir. The union movement built the middle class. The union movement is building Ohio. Look at this map, folks. $159.4 billion in investment from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, from the CHIPS Act, Intel. You got employers up the wazoo wanting to come here. Wazoo is a term of art. It's not something you play, okay? It is a term of art. But I'll tell you, it's about the Charleses of the world. Giving example, giving opportunity, and taking those things to scale. That's just one example of how federal funds are able to be taken locally and then taken to scale. That's the example that's happening here, one of many examples. And I'm so excited that, again, the Brent Spence Bridge is a reality. I mean, I remember, we won't go down that road, but I do know someone who promised back in 2019 that they were going to build it. And you know what? I know someone who's building it. And that's so important moving forward. So many other investments here, whether it's the CHIPS Act, you look at the Intel, how many thousands of people, Mayor, will be employed through those investments? You look at the Inflation Reduction Act, which is only in the beginning stages of implementation. And it's a remarkable set of opportunities to allow partnership, to allow more Charleses to be moving forward, to build more union jobs here in Ohio. And the Inflation Reduction Act has another benefit, and that is those 10 drugs that have been listed by the FDA, by HHS, that will be the subject of negotiation. And if you are concerned about racial and ethnic disparities in health status, as I am, as we all are here, I had the privilege of serving on the Kaiser Commission on Medicaid and the uninsured. And these lower drug prices are going to help everyone. But if you look at the illnesses that they are designed to treat, disproportionately black and brown people suffer from those afflictions. So it is another example of how what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do are helping everyone. But the equity lens through which they view opportunity and through which you view opportunity and success is very real. We just had lunch here, and I want to thank the two people in the back. Can you all stand up, the two of you? I know. Thank you for what you're doing. I just had a conversation with two of your workers, and I asked them, what do you like best about your job? They said, I like the people. We all get along. That's what they said. You inspire them. And the one woman said, 6 months ago, I never would have dreamed that I could be doing this. And you're giving them hope. And you, Mayor, and the commissioners are also doing the same thing by making those investments. I know that we can do so much more, but we need to do it together. Right now, we have a situation where during the pandemic, we suspended certain rules, including rules regarding eligibility for Medicaid. Now that Title 42 has expired, Medicaid recipients have to re-enroll. And we need your help in partnership with this, because we want to make sure that every eligible person has access to health care. Thanks to Obamacare and thanks to the work that President Biden and Vice President Harris are doing, the ranks of the uninsured are reaching their lowest levels ever. And if that's a big deal. But we still have more work to do. And the immediate work requires all of your help. And that's why I'm so appreciative that we have so many mayors here, and we have the House leader here, because we need everybody to use your bully pulpits, to get with communities, to say, hey, time to sign up, because we don't want anybody falling through the cracks. Now, some people have graduated, and that's great if they've gotten a good job. But what we have seen across the country is that many people are in danger of being taken off the rolls because of red tape. And we can't allow that to happen. So this is another example of something that we will do in partnership with you. And I have spent a lot of time on this issue, and our colleagues at HHS and our Domestic Policy Council are doing the same thing. We have to tackle gun violence, and President Biden helped pass one of the first pieces of gun violence reduction legislation in decades. And DOJ and Mayor, thank you for your leadership on gun violence reduction. I've had a number of conversations with the mayor, and by the way, America will benefit when the mayor of Columbus in less than a year becomes the president of the Conference of Mayors nationally. Congratulations, Mayor, and thank you for your service in that area. The Department of Justice has awarded $230 million for state crisis intervention, including the implementation of red flag laws. So we got to get to work, because, folks, I wish we could do more on gun violence reduction. I wish we could do more on background checks and common sense measures that could keep communities safer. And that's why we need your help and your engagement, because I am confident that we can do this. And I am really looking forward today, because we heard this morning from Charles and from our union brothers and sisters and from so many others. But what I love about what we call our communities in action, and by the way, a year ago, many of you were in Washington talking about the great work Ohio's doing. We're making house calls today to see what else you're doing. And it is a long list of things that you are doing. And that is why I am so excited as we move to the next phase here, where we can hear from folks in the communities. And to those who are elected officials here, again, we need your help. And thank you so much for what you're doing. And remember, for those of you who are serial activists, like President Watson and others, we need your continued help. For those of you who are responsible for building these projects, we need to tell the world that project labor agreements work, that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president that we've known. And that as a result of this is a big reason why you got a 3% unemployment rate, folks. In labor economics, we call that the natural rate of unemployment. I hate that term, because the natural rate should be 0, because we want everybody to work. And that's what we're going to be talking about, how we can leverage so many of these resources that I referenced, whether it's the infrastructure bill or the CHIPS Act or the IRA. We are literally still in the early stages of implementation. So we need everybody working together. You know, we may play different instruments, but we're all in the same orchestra. That is the orchestra of opportunity, the orchestra of equity, the orchestra of full employment, the orchestra of building a community where everybody's got a seat at the table and a megaphone to express their views. That's Bidenomics. That's what we're talking about. And that's what we're here today to discuss. And so I look forward now to moving to this discussion. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from folks about what you're doing in your communities and what else we can do moving forward. So, Mayor Ginther, please have a seat as well, and Commissioner Crowley as well. Join us over here. Yeah, I'll sit over here. Thorn between two roses, we call this. Mayor, this is your city, so I'd love to start with you.
Just review. Well, first of all, welcome to Columbus and Franklin County. I know the commissioners and the city are thrilled to have you here, but the entire state. You heard from mayors who were part of the original connection a year ago at the White House with your colleagues at
Right.
IGA and had a great session that day, engaging with everybody from Secretary Fudge, Congresswoman Beatty, and so many other folks about how we could leverage. I would argue that this is the most pro-city and pro-local government administration in our lifetimes. And if you think about the domestic agenda, and I know some of it hasn't made its full impact and being fully realized just as yet, but you take a look at the rescue plan. And by the way, the rescue plan was bipartisan because there were Republican mayors and county commissioners from around America that weighed in and advocated and supported that. But you take a look at the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act, as you mentioned, the gun safety legislation, first time since the Clinton administration anything was done federally on gun safety at the federal level. There are so many examples. Obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act, we were just at the White House a week or two ago celebrating that anniversary and those resources flowing to cities. We were fortunate to have the First Lady here just about a month or so ago announcing Columbus and Central Ohio becoming a workforce hub for the country. I think one of the original 8s. Five, even more exclusive. But talk to us a little bit about opportunities that you're seeing around the country with respect to the CHIPS Act, obviously Intel. I remind folks that for every one Intel job, there'll be 10 jobs created by suppliers and vendors of Intel. So a game changer here in Central Ohio, and quite honestly, it's going to benefit Lima, in Elyria, and places all over our state with respect to suppliers and vendors. But
I mean, opportunities abound. I come to you with an unrelenting optimism because when I look at the pipeline of opportunity, on top of what you've already done, it feels limitless. And the selection of Columbus as one of 5 workforce hubs nationally is a big deal. And the reason I think you were selected is that, you know, when you look at the broader region, not just Franklin County, you have a lot of assets. And, you know, as your former labor secretary, what you want to do, effective regions build ecosystems. You have a great community college system. You've got obvious higher ed anchors. This will pain my wife, who went to Wisconsin, to say, but the Ohio State University. I've been to a couple football games here at the Horseshoe when they played Wisconsin, and it's a crazy place. Fun crazy. But that's what this workforce hub model is designed to do. And it's very demand driven. You don't train people to make widgets if nobody's building widgets. And what you're doing here you've got Intel and all the tech world. You've got incredible opportunities to take apprenticeship to scale. And by the way, the union movement has the original patent on apprenticeship. But apprenticeship doesn't need to be limited to the skilled trades. If you go to Switzerland, which I did many times as labor secretary, you had the CEO of Zurich Insurance, you know, a Fortune 50 company, started out as an apprentice. And the beauty of it was he went on, got a 4-year degree and did other things, but you go to where your passions take you. And that's what the workforce hub system is about. And I think you are well positioned to take advantage of opportunities, because the difference between ARPA and the bills now, ARPA is sort of winding down in terms of the funding streams, but ARPA was local government's best friend. Here's some money, you figure out how to spend it, and be responsible. And we trusted you because we believe in you. The IRA and bill and the CHIPS Act, they require applications. There's a lot of competitive grant proposals that I think, and I can tell you as someone who reviewed grant proposals, when I see proposals coming from folks who have an ecosystem, as opposed to one-offs and, okay, I got this competing proposal from this part of the community and this competing proposal from the other. That told me that they weren't an ecosystem.
That's right.
And so I think you are well positioned there, and I urge you as you move forward, and that's what I love about the program that we visited this morning, is it's abundantly clear to me that a bunch of folks came together, inside and outside government, and that's beautiful.
If I could just follow
Sure.
up, Director.
Tom, is a lot quicker, please. And
said
thank you for
important.
your military service, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Tom. So I really appreciate your perspective, you know, not just as Labor Secretary and the role that you have now, but understanding local government, being on county council, and just building off of what you just said about like ARPA funding, you know, kind of transitioning and phasing out. And our Building Futures program, which it is successful because of the wraparound services, right, that are provided to our members that are in those programs. But another program that we have that we use with ARPA funds is Tech Women of Color. And so that's for 200 women to get into the 200 women, Black and brown women, to get into the tech industry, and we hope that they end up in Intel or other businesses. But we know with these programs that supportive services are needed, like childcare, and childcare continues to be a problem, especially for women and women of color. And so if you can just talk about what other initiatives that the administration is doing, partnering with local governments to support our workers as we try to get them from being unemployed or underemployed and directly into the middle class facing that barrier.
That's a great question, Commissioner, and let me start by just venting a little bit. We know how to reduce childhood poverty. Why do I say that with such confidence? Because we just did it in the American Rescue Plan. We reduced childhood poverty by 40% because we had a child care tax credit. 40%. We know how to do it. What we lack is the political will on the part of the Republicans to make that a permanent authorization and investment. And it just, it pains me because that was a 40% reduction. And we couldn't move it forward. And so, you know, notwithstanding that, there are other tools in the toolbox. You know, in the workforce system, there are a lot of grant opportunities for, I mean, because we spent a lot of time identifying barriers to female labor force participation. And while the child care tax credit doesn't exclusively help women, it disproportionately benefited women.
Right.
And so a number of grant programs, and I would strongly urge you to work with your workforce system, and I certainly spent a lot of time with the Department of Labor on a number of issues. I know where the place is. And again, I can think of a number of things I did when I was State Labor Secretary, using federal workforce dollars to provide child care, to provide transportation credits. That was a big barrier to participation. Somebody just needed a little money to get a car.
Right.
And, you know, that's called spending a little bit of money to get a major ROI from someone. So, you know, so I would urge you to think about those tools that are in the toolbox. I would urge you in some of the grant proposals that you put in, some of your IRA proposals that you put in, to be thinking about things like, well, we're going to have union labor, because, by the way, why would you do that? Well, among other reasons, besides the fact that it's a smart thing to do, you'll get a credit. And there's all these stackable credits. Where are you going to locate your workforce? If you locate your workforce in a certain part of town, you get another stackable credit. And pretty soon, you have a situation where even if the child care issues are not directly covered, you have gotten a sufficient amount of federal assistance indirectly that enables you to address those issues.
I appreciate that. And if I had just one follow-up real quick on that, because I know the Biden administration, especially with Intel, has kind of attached, like, making sure childcare was available while they're on site. Do you see the administration doing more of those types of policies in order to draw down federal funds, that there has to be?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing our best within our legal constraints to strongly incentivize the employment of union labor, strongly incentivize childcare. I mean, we have an enviable challenge right now. We have a workforce shortage. We have incredible opportunity in this region, and I'm not just talking about Franklin County. I'm talking about, over in Akron, over in Lima, elsewhere in this state. And I've spent a lot of time in this state. I've spent 2 years of my life down in Lawrence County. I know that it's not Ironton, it's Arnton. Okay? That's when I teach cultural competence to trial lawyers, I use that example. It's not Mississippi. If you go down there, it's Mississippi. You got to know how to say these things. But I digress. I'm sorry. But I really do. I really do think that these opportunities exist. And we are, I used to coach basketball. You don't shoot free throws from the top of the key. You get right up to the free throw line and you shoot your free throws. We are doing everything as aggressively as possible to address childcare, to address transportation, to address equity. And that's why I'm a broken record when I say this is a moment. When you look back on your careers, those of you who are elected officials or even former elected officials, this is the moment you will look back on when you had the greatest amount of opportunity to leverage federal dollars. And I don't want you to look back in 5 years or 10 years and say, dadgummit, kind of missed that opportunity. You've been doing a great job of it, as evidenced by the data. But there's still more opportunity to access. I mean, we've really just begun on IRA, and Bill is making progress, but we're still, I'd say we're maybe at midfield on Bill. So that means there's a lot more to do.
I want to ask Tom about housing. It's something we talked to Secretary Fudge when we were with her last year in Washington. Continues to be a big issue, not just in Central Ohio, but around the state. And here in Central Ohio, you've spoken to economic development, job creation. It's been off the charts. We haven't been building enough housing since before the Great Recession. Only about half the number of units are coming to market that we need, at all price points, by the way. We need more market, we need more workforce, we need affordable. Our goal here is to double the number of units coming to market every year, because that supply problem is not going away, and demand is going to continue to be an issue as we grow by another third over the next 30 years in this region. So talk to us, if we believe that housing is infrastructure, help us think about that as we think about the future in this region. It's something that the city and the county and the state are working together about. And you've spoken a little bit about communities that are leading the country, and I think the world, are ones acting regionally. The housing solution can't just be provided by the city, certainly by the county. It has to be regional.
Absolutely.
And so talk a little bit about the Biden administration's focus on housing and some ways maybe that we could work with you all to help meet this need. Because quite honestly, we think everybody that works here, whether you drive a bus, you're teaching our kids, or you're taking care of our parents, you ought to be able to afford to live here too, and not have to commute 2 or 3 hours to get to work.
I couldn't agree more. And I remember when I was labor secretary going out to Silicon Valley, we went to Stanford, and we met with the people who were cleaning dorm rooms, working in the dining halls, and I asked them, what's your average commute? And the average commute was 100 minutes a day each way. That's 3 hours and 20 minutes that you don't see your kids. And then they wonder, why don't you participate in your kids' PTA? That's a dumb question, because you don't have time. And that's why, we have to understand the intersectionality of all this. There's some recent data that came out that was very interesting to me that showed average rents in cities across the country, and most of your cities would be on this list. I don't know how granular it got. And then how much square footage, if you were to try to purchase, that it would get. So like in San Francisco, it would get you a parking space maybe. But there were, like in Buffalo where I grew up, it actually, it would get you like a $1,200 monthly rental payment. You could have a $1,200 mortgage and actually be building a nest egg. And I think there are a number of places here where you might have some similar opportunity. But the reality is we have to anticipate. We got to play chess, not checkers. This is great that we have all these Intel jobs coming in. This is great that we're attracting. This is in the aggregate. Now in Franklin County, at least, I haven't studied the rest of the state, but you have in the aggregate a very educated workforce, and that puts incredible pressure on housing prices. Yeah. And as you recruit people, that's going to put even more pressure, which is why not only Secretary Fudge, who does have an affection for Ohio, I will note,
and a former mayor.
And a former mayor, that's right, that's right. That's a twofer. You know, I think there's a number of opportunities under the category of infrastructure, because we have to build a healthcare infrastructure. When I think of infrastructure, I think of it broadly. We have to build a healthcare infrastructure. We have to build a housing infrastructure. We have to build, by the way, an education infrastructure. And we have to build, and it cuts across all of this, we have to build a community mental health infrastructure. Yes. The mental health crisis in this country is acute. And I mean, if you look at the job prospects around this area and every area in the country, healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, educators, para-educators, school psychologists. I mean, like, it doesn't matter where we are in America, those are in demand. And so I urge you, as you're thinking about like IRA projects or bill projects, housing has to be in your menu of options that you discuss. And I do urge you to think about things that can be done at a local level in addition to a federal level. Like, in my county, we have inclusionary zoning. So if you want to build 100 units of housing, 15 have to be affordable at 60% of AMI, area median income. And that has been in place for a long time. When I was on the council, we modernized the program, but you start, again, in some communities, you're able to do that. In other communities, the economics will not necessarily work out. So I'm not suggesting that this is a panacea, but I would argue in Franklin County, at least, that it's something that you should consider if you haven't already done so at a local level. And it brought about not only the economic integration of our county, but the racial integration. And when I had NIMBY forces, I would ask them, so what is it that scares you about having your teacher live in your neighborhood? Or your police officer, or your firefighter, or someone who's working in the building trades who maybe built your house? Like, why does that scare you? It shouldn't.
Yeah, we're rewriting our zoning code for the first time in 70 years as a city.
Oh, this is a moment of great opportunity then.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Secretary Fudge said to us last year is, we need you to rewrite your zoning code so that it's embracing density and height. The two number one things we know, two critically important things that contribute to affordability, but you can imagine the gnashing of teeth that will take place not just in the city, but the county and the region. But it's critically important work that we've got to do.
And I think you can build. I've been involved in building coalitions. We had, and I apologize for these war stories, but when I was on the county council, there was a proposal to build an apartment a building that was going to house, it would be 10 apartments for women who had substance abuse issues, who were trying to live in the community and hopefully get their kids back. And, there were some NIMBY forces, and what I was most proud of is, I told folks, I'm voting for this. This is the right thing to do. And I don't care if I lose my job. You should never be afraid to, get thrown out of office for doing the right thing.
Right.
But the thing that I was so proud of is the community rallied around it and said, we are an inclusive enough community. We want to help this cohort of folks who are trying to right their lives. And so I really think that you can muster the will, but you really need to build a robust and diverse coalition to do that. Because you can write the playbook on what the opposition will be, but if you don't increase density, you'll chip at the edges.
Traffic and parking has never meant so many different things in these conversations, but I know, Commissioner, you've got some follow-ups.
I was going to say, I said that as I became a commissioner, I have not had more conversations about parking than ever before, but it is good. But to your point, and the mayor and I were just part of a project that's about building coalitions and having a public-private partnership. And for the county, using American Rescue Plan dollars, it was a requirement that most of the housing that we were going to be investing in was at 60% AMI. And I think that's what we will continue to do going forward, is requiring, if you want to do business with the county, and we have a good partnership with the city, that we have to have inclusive housing that will be for people who are working. If it's an apartment complex that's going to have mixed use, whether it's restaurants or coffee shops, the people who work there should be able to live there as well. And so that is what we're looking forward to as we move forward in the county. But when we talk about...
You just triggered a thought, and then I want to hear your question, though. One other thing that you should consider is, as you address like subpopulations where you have real need, there are some real opportunities to leverage federal resources. And let me give you just one example, and that is veterans homelessness. I used to chair the Interagency Council on Homelessness, which is 8 different agencies of the federal government. You're probably wondering, why does the Labor Department, why does the Labor Secretary chair that? Because if you're going to combat challenges confronting unhoused people, it's got to be a whole of government enterprise, housing first. If somebody has a mental health need, which my wife has been working with unhoused people for 26 years, and 95% of her clients have issues, and a substantial subset are veterans. And so I've worked with cities that have been able to functionally eliminate veterans homelessness by taking that whole of government approach. And there's a lot of resources that you can put to bear to address people who are experiencing homelessness, or people who, veterans who have housing insecurity. And I am betting that even in a partisan environment at the State House, that you can muster some consensus, I would like to think, around at least a subset of these issues. And I'm looking at the leader, and thank you so much for being here, Leah Russo, today. I hope that that's an example of something where the state can step up.
Absolutely. We are a veteran-friendly state, and I would say from my time in the legislature serving with Leader Russo, I think that is a place where there is good partnership, is supporting veterans like myself and others. So, but as we talk about new bills and new infrastructure, we can't have that conversation without talking about the impact on the environment. And we know that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, has some provisions for climate and addressing climate change. But if you could just talk to us a little bit more about what the administration is doing to ensure infrastructure can minimize the impact on the environment, that would be great.
Well, I think the inflation, I love your question, by the way. And the Inflation Reduction Act is one of the most transformational pieces of legislation to address climate needs, and the infrastructure bill. If you're not, when you're drafting when you have a proposal, you're not going to pass EIS muster if you're not paying very, very careful attention to these issues. I mean, I don't think, again, I don't think there's a president who has done more to address the issue of climate change than President Biden. And and he has brought the way to do it is to bring everyone to the table. I remember there's a guy who I work very closely with named Lonnie Stevenson, who's I know he's laughing in the back because you know Lonnie very well. He's the former president of IBEW. Endorsed Joe Biden, by the way, the day before the Nevada caucus, when Joe Biden came in a distant second in that caucus. It was like, whoever the horse that was second to Secretariat. And Lonnie knew something. But the reason I bring this up is everybody's got to be at the table. And, he has brought our labor partners to the table. I mean, the clean energy economy, we have to understand. I mean, I have spent a significant amount of time with the governor of Hawaii. I mean, these 100-year events are no longer 100-year events. They feel like 100-day events. And that is why there has been so much emphasis. But once again, the incentives that are built into these alphabet soup of provisions that have been passed are incentives that are going to enable us to employ folks at good union wages and to address our climate needs. We can't live in the world of either ors. We've got to do both. 200 people died this summer in the city of Phoenix due to heat-related stuff. A woman in a wheelchair fell out of her wheelchair. She was on the ground for 6 minutes before someone found her, and she sustained third-degree burns. I mean, this stuff is real. We can't deny it anymore. And I appreciate your question, and I appreciate that the president and the vice president are so focused on this. And as you do local planning in your communities, resilience is huge. And I know that whether it's in Akron or Lima or wherever your local government takes you, this just has to be part of the planning.
Can we talk about student debt? It's a big issue here in Central Ohio and Ohio. So just a couple quick numbers, Tom. In Ohio, we have the 6th highest number of borrowers for student loans and a balance of $63.5 billion. It's an average of $36,000 per borrower. So this is really an issue across the state, and I know across the country. But when you're thinking about it, as we're creating this pipeline for opportunity, growing a 21st century economy here, just in Central Ohio, at any given point during the academic year, 100,000 students are in either undergraduate study at Columbus State, Ohio Wesleyan, Denison, all the Franklin, so many great colleges and universities here. But it's an issue definitely affecting Lima, Akron, Elyria, Lorain, cities across the state. If we want this pipeline and we want to attract the best and brightest, tell us a little bit. I know the president has been probably the most aggressive leader and advocate on student debt that in recent memory. Talk a little bit about what you're doing, even with some of the setbacks from the courts, what you've been able to do for students.
This one's personal. I was 12 when my dad passed away, and I worked 3 jobs in college, and when I graduated from graduate school, I had debt up the wazoo, and so I get it. I was a Pell Grant kid, and this has been it's stifling, and access to opportunity shouldn't be limited to those who have the fortuity of birth into a family with means. And the president has been relentless. And I would invite you, if you have an opportunity, there was a probably 7-minute clip this morning on NPR, and I listened to it on my way to the airport. And it went through a long Q&A about student debt relief. And the long story short is the president has gone as far as he can legally go. And I would argue that actually the stuff that the court threw out, if we had a different composition of this court, would have been a different outcome. Yeah. And I get frustrated when people get frustrated with the Biden administration. Oh, you didn't do enough. We swung the bat as hard as we could, and notwithstanding what the court has done, I urge you, there is a website, and Isabella, if we can get I forgot the acronym, if we can get it and, write it down here, because I think it should be on everybody's website. If if you have issues with student debt relief, I mean, tens of billions of dollars are being forgiven if you fall into the right category. So while we haven't been able to do as much as we would like to do as an administration, we've been able to do a heck of a lot. And, when people, I want a leader who's going to fight for me and who understands my plight. Yeah. And, I appreciate that. Even after these setbacks, I think the average person thought, well, none of this is going to happen. Well, we didn't stop. We kept moving forward and doing everything we could. And the other side, they're still trying to go to court. And I don't understand that. What is, pick a different battle. Yeah. Yeah. But please, if we could get that website before folks leave today, because this story this morning was really instructive. And the challenge is that people fall into different categories in terms of, there's some people who have debt from like 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's one program. Then, you kind of need a navigator, but Congress has made it impossible for them to ramp up their technical assistance. So it's harder to figure it out, and there's less people to help you. Yeah. That's not Joe Biden's fault. Yeah. That's what the Congress in its infinite wisdom has tried to do. And in this budget cycle, as we try to advocate for more folks to help with that, we don't have a dance partner.
Well, and I think it also gets to the heart of a pipeline for public service. Whether you want to be a police officer, firefighter, work in public health, work in neighborhoods, work in criminal justice, this student debt and this huge amount, $36,000 per borrower in the state of Ohio. Yeah. Can you really become a public defender? Can you really become a prosecutor? Can you really become a legislative aide to a county commissioner or a mayor, even though that's your passion and you have a great deal to offer and leverage the public based on this debt? Is that prohibited?
I mean, I have a nephew who went to medical school. He has $280,000 in debt. That's a mortgage, folks. That's not a debt. That's an educational mortgage. And we need to take the term educational mortgage out of our lexicon, because that is unconscionable. And he wants to be a public interest doctor, but it's hard to be a public interest doctor when you got over $250,000 in debt. So, well, I am.
Everyone's reference, actually, before we move on, just to say it's the SAVE plan. So if you go to studentaid.gov/save, SAVE, you will have it. And I will be sure to email it, but just in the meantime.
We'll get it on the city and county website and everywhere in between,
By the way, I should have mentioned at the outset, Isabella works on our team at IGA and is doing remarkable work and organized today. And Camilo there is in the back as well. Camilo was here because Camilo just joined us, having worked with the First Lady. So he was here when the First Lady came to the Workforce Hub here in Columbus maybe 2 months ago, thereabouts. So we have a great team, and they have renewed my faith in Gen Xers and Gen Zers, and they worked their tails off. So
I'm going to look to them. How much time do we have left? Can the Commissioner follow up?
Yeah.
Commissioner, you get the last word.
I appreciate that, Mayor. And so just to bring it home, and I'm glad you asked about the question about student loan debt, because that is one challenge that is facing our workforce. But if you could just tell us what else you're seeing across the country when it comes to challenges and getting people into the workforce, whether it's AI or people working remotely or working multiple gig jobs. What else are you seeing that local governments should be, aware of and how we can make an impact?
Well, let me give you the good news, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges. The good news is that this president has presided over unprecedented job growth. I could show you the chart of jobs per month created under the last 5 presidents, and what you would see is we are literally 3x more than the second person, and that's because the investment, the investments that were made at the beginning of this pandemic. When I was your labor secretary in 2013 or so, the thing that kept me up the most at night, Commissioner, was the plight of the long-term unemployed. You're 55 years old, you're non-college educated, and your job went away, and you've got a 2-year hole on your resume. You're kind of screwed. And that's what was happening. And part of the reason that happened is the stimulus bill, which passed in '09, the Recovery Act, it was 800 or 900 billion dollars. It was, the president wanted to be more aggressive, but it was as much as the politics of the moment would permit. But the reality was, and if President Obama were here, he'd be the first to say, it wasn't enough. And so people, you had long-term unemployed, you had all sorts of other challenges. We didn't allow that to happen this time. And as a result of that, we have historically low unemployment rates and real opportunities. But that doesn't mean that we don't have challenges. As Intel prepares to make a $20 billion investment here in this area, we need to make sure we have the workforce. The most frequent thing when I ask employers, what keeps you up at night? The number one answer to that question, workforce. Yeah. Workforce, workforce. Whether it's the hospitality industry, whether it's advanced manufacturing, chip makers, and there's opportunities that cut across a continuum. You don't need a PhD to get a middle-class Intel job. And that's why your community colleges, I'm a huge believer in community colleges. I'm a huge believer in having articulation agreements so your kids graduating high school have already experienced college life, whether it was at your community college or it was at one of the 4-year public universities. And so it's really important, and I'm concerned about the skills mismatch in this region and elsewhere. And that's why the workforce system needs to have everyone at the table so that we know from the employer side, here's our projection of need, and then the workforce system can adjust accordingly. And if we can address that, then that will really help. And then, we talked about the other barriers. We need to eliminate, a number of cities have done ban the box. Yes. Thank God that the union we were at today is inclusive. We have a workforce, and then I will note other things. You have a lot of folks who are going to be coming in from other countries. Yeah. Yes, we do. And I've done a lot of work with, I'll leave you with this story. The hospital 3 miles from my house that delivers more babies by a factor of 3 than any the hospital in Maryland. They had a workforce shortage, and they were going to South Africa and the Philippines to recruit H-1B nurses, and they went to those 2 countries because they could get English speakers. a morally dubious practice, I would argue. And little did they know that we had this incredible influx of immigrants from Central and South America who were sweeping floors in their facility, who were healthcare professionals. And all they needed was a little brushing up on their English. They had status, work authorization. They needed some brushing up. And for a nominal investment of about $5,000 a head, getting an H-1B is like $75,000 a head. We allowed people to realize their highest and best dreams. So as you have influx, and you have the largest Somali community other than Minneapolis in this country. And so I have a feeling that I would be willing to bet that you have a lot of Uber drivers who are really talented. And so don't overlook opportunities that exist in your own backyard. And it's really fun when you connect people to things that are not just their vocation, but their avocation. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Thank you so much, Tom.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are going to proceed to our next part, and I think I saw the mayor walk in of Cincinnati. Oh, there he is. Welcome, Mayor. Mayor Aftab Pirwal, who I had the privilege of meeting back in 2017 when I had a different job that shall go unnamed, and he was a superstar then and is a superstar now. So, Isabella, where?
Yes.
How you doing, man?
Good to see
you. Long time no see. Right? It's been days.
So thank you all. I'll provide a little bit of context as we move into this portion here. So this is what we like to call story sharing. So for those of you who were at the event 1 year ago, this is when we asked for you to share a little bit about how Biden-Harris administration investments have made an impact in your community, where there's room for improvement, but just kind of so that we can bring that back home to DC and share with our partners so we can continue to improve things for all Ohioans. So how we do this is usually we just have people raise hands and we go from there. Ooh. Oh, well, in that case, timing.
Good to see you, brother, as always. Mayor Frank Whitfield, City of Elyria, Ohio. I've often said without the American Rescue Plan, we would have been looking at layoffs of our police officers. But because of it, we've actually increased our public safety forces, invested in gun violence interruption that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. But I think the thing I'm most proud of is that we were able to use American Rescue Plan dollars to invest in people. So we have a scholarship program in our city with our Lorain County Community College, which you visited many times, where any resident can go to the community college free as long as they're pursuing an in-demand occupation. And then we've put money into a grant program to help people, what we call spruce up their homes. So try to increase the value of people's homes. They can apply for grants to do landscaping, siding, roofs, anything to raise up the value of their home. So that's the thing I'm most proud of, is the resources we put into people. But without it, we would be having an entirely different conversation. I started January 2020, so I know what life was like BC and AD. So before ARPA, I know what life was like. So I'm so appreciative of this administration and looking forward to continue to partner together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, let me turn to you for some, first of all, commentary, because I have a feeling that you have some thoughts on ARPA and other things, and so let me turn to you.
Well, I completely agree with my colleague. You know, ARP was, in addition to building for the future, was critical for cities in Ohio in particular, given the impact of remote work on our general fund revenues. ARP was really a godsend, and more than just layoffs, it really provided Cincinnati with the funds necessary to keep solvent, to continue to provide the basic services that people expect from government, whether it's public safety, but also sanitation and plowing the streets, fixing the potholes. We would not have had the dollars necessary to function as a city without ARP. And so without question, it was necessary, it was immediate, and it saved cities across the state. And before either the mayor or I got into office, lessons from the past of the federal government sending funds directly to the cities was also really, really helpful because it cut down on some of the bureaucracy and red tape and was able to empower cities to get federal dollars onto the streets more quickly and effectively.
And you shared with me, it wasn't an ARPA story, but it was, I think, an infrastructure bill story. And we have one of Cincinnati's famous steel workers, iron workers here, Sarah, to your left. And
I've never been to the State of the Union.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you mentioned to me something that stuck in my head, which is that these investments have not only enabled you to do basic things like the mayor, outlined, and thank you for that testimonial, but they've also enabled you to address some historic discrimination that really tore communities apart, especially black communities across America. I know that happened in my hometown of Buffalo, where they put in the 60s, in the spirit of urban renewal, they put an express lane so that the white folks living in the suburbs could get to downtown, and they cut right through the heart of the black community.
That happened in Cincinnati. You know, the 50s and 60s, we had a thriving community known as Kenyon Bar, historically black community directly west of downtown. Commissioner Boyce, welcome. Give him a round of applause. And, you know, that historically black community was destroyed, was completely wiped out. Federal government and the city and the state took all the land through eminent domain, and a lot of the families from that neighborhood are still struggling with the after effects of destroying that neighborhood. And neighborhood is an easy word to just whitewash, but destroyed small businesses, destroyed churches, destroyed the fabric of life for so many Cincinnatians. And so with the trillions of dollars available, not just through ARP, but also the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, IRA, we are really trying to focus in Cincinnati on not just getting our fair share of that, but how we can use those big pieces of federal legislation together in order to invest as much as we can in the West End. And the way that we're doing that is through very proud of this, but Kentucky and Ohio received the largest single federal grant in our country's history, $1.6 billion, to do a companion bridge next to the Brent Spence, which is the poster child for the infrastructure bill, because 3% of our nation's GDP goes over that bridge. But in addition to it being critically important nationally, locally it's important because it's allowing us to reclaim some of the land that was destroyed in this historically black neighborhood and use it specifically for economic development that we're intending for the legacy residents and the folks who came from those families to share in that success and to build from that. We're also applying for a HUD Choice Grant, $50 million to rehab all of our low-income housing and also to build double the amount of market rate housing targeted in the West End in order to balance some of the larger investments on the east side. And then the connected communities, we won a $25 million grant to put the main street of the West End on a road diet, which will encourage more investment. So with different parts of different federal legislation, we're able to right historical wrongs, double our impact with our local match, and rebuild the face of Cincinnati that will be completely changed for a generation. And that's only, thank you, and that's only because of the actions of the Biden administration to provide these funds really at a crossroads for not just Cincinnati, but for all cities. A crossroads because of climate change, because of the pandemic, because of remote work. And the cities that are flexible and innovative right now in this time will be the ones that create huge success and growth for their cities in the next 100 years.
Well, that's not only compelling, but I learned a new term, a road diet. Wow.
Ask Secretary Buttigieg,
yes,
or really any mayor about road diets,
yes, no,
and you'll get an earful.
Yes. Commissioner Boyce, we're doing, it's been hours.
Yeah, that's right.
Good to see you, and thank you for all you have done here in Franklin County. Yeah, we just had a very robust dialogue with one of your colleagues and with the mayor Columbus. And we're really talking now about how federal investments have enabled you to leverage other resources and build community.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, good to see you, Mayor. Always good to have friends like you here. You know, for Central Ohio, and I think to some degree for Southern Ohio, Cincinnati area, we're experiencing a substantial amount of growth. There's not a place in Central Ohio you can't go and see orange cones or cranes in the sky that tells the story of our growth. Certainly, Intel's presence is creating an amplifying boom to that growth on a regional level. And so now more than ever, we're really faced with a number of challenges around growth, and our partners at the federal level make it happen for us. And so earlier today, we had the opportunity to spend time talking about building futures, which gives everyone a stake in that growth. You know, whether you are in the building trades, whether you are a small business or in technology, and you said it very well earlier, and that's a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's our mantra, and that's where federal funds, be it ARPA funds, build dollars, have all been catalysts to us being able to think creatively about how to maximize that partnership and invest it in a way that creates sustainable kind of efforts. You know, the type of training which you're at today that provide middle income type jobs and that can really undergird a family's quality of life. And I think because our philosophies match in those two sort of, with those two grant programs I talked about, we're able to build programs like Building Futures. One program you didn't get to see was Driving Futures, which is very similar to Building Futures, but it's for commerce and logistics. And it allows us to serve as a logistical hub for the Midwestern region. And so those kind of resources gives, again, everyone a claim at some of that growth and some of that experience. And our federal funds have been absolutely catalytic to that. We're fortunate to have congressional delegation members that really understand that, and they're bipartisan. You know, they work together to deliver resources with the understanding that it is an investment in long-term strategy and sustainability. The one point I add to what the mayor talked about was the division of the highways and what they did to our communities like Cincinnati. Communities like Columbus have experienced that all across the country. And so now I feel like the funds that have come from the federal resources have really put us in a position of strength to maximize that for every resident. And quite frankly, it's evolving. You know, this economy has tested our ability to think creatively. Obviously, COVID had a lasting impact, but the economy, the sort of looming possibilities of the direction of the economy have created an even higher degree of urgency around that partnership and being strategic about it. And I feel like the White House has been absolutely tremendous. Your presence here is an example of that. And so now it's allowing us to connect the dots so that, again, as you said, all boats rise as the tide comes in.
Well, I appreciate that you've made sure that the rising tide actually lifts all the boats and not just the yachts. And the program we visited this morning is a testimony to that. And we talked, and both the commissioner before you who was here and the mayor, you know, I think I really appreciate your eye toward equity in everything that you're doing. The investments that you're making in workforce are critical. That is, you know, it's the more not everyone needs a college degree to punch their ticket to the middle class. At the same time, we know that many of the jobs that are in demand, and whether it's in Hamilton County, whether it's in Lorraine, you know, wherever we are in the state of Ohio, are going to demand more than a high school degree. And that's, you have an acute understanding of that. That's why, you know, you're a workforce hub. And I would really call the entire state a workforce hub? Because you've all been very entrepreneurial.
Well, I mean, it really, it's so perfectly, everything the commissioner said so perfectly aligns with the Biden administration's efforts, because but for CHIPS, we would not have paved the way for Intel to make a $200 billion investment in Central Ohio. And obviously the impact of that on workforce is going to be primarily felt in Central Ohio, but even in Southern Ohio, we are expecting some supply chain impact on our local economy. And so in anticipation of that, we actually used ARP dollars. This is another example of how your federal legislation is working in tandem in cities. We got ARP dollars. We invested $10 million of that into the port, which is buying up sites and getting them ready for high-tech manufacturers to come in and build more supply chain advanced manufacturing in support of that Intel site. So because of the administration's focus on chips, focus on advanced manufacturing, you're providing a pipeline to communities in Ohio that were built based on manufacturing, and it looks like the future is bright again for advanced manufacturing and not just Cincinnati, but the state.
And Mayor, if I could just add to that, for the Biden administration, I'm really glad you said that way, because the other thing is expedience. I feel like the administration has been very responsive and been able to roll out the programs that they have in an expedient way, where we've been able to take advantage of it, quickly react and be nimble to whatever our community needs might be, different than, say, Cincinnati or Hamilton County. And that's a difference maker, especially in a climate where there's some question around the pandemic and just different things that have kind of loomed over us the last few years. And it's really been the expedience of the administration that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, good point. Leader Russo, I was wondering if I could just turn to you for a moment, because you have a unique perch. And
unique is one way to put it.
Some would call it an enviable perch. Others might have a different opinion.
Yes. Well, first, let me say thank you again for being here today. And, you know, I look around the room and listening, we have so much talent in our local public servants who are represented here and providing a lot of information about what's going on in the state. Several recovering legislators, Commissioner Boyce and Commissioner Crawley here. I do want to take just a quick minute. I've got two colleagues here, Representative Lightbody and Representative Muhammad, who are here. Thank you for joining from the State House as well.
What are your districts?
We're both Franklin County. I'm
Both
northeast corner, West Willoughby, Albany, and Hannah.
All Columbus. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So right here in Franklin County. So thank you both for being here. Yes, we certainly do have an interesting perspective at the state. And, you know, I just want to take a moment to kind of, you know, give a little bit of that view because we have so much opportunity here now because of the Biden-Harris administration and the investments, the federal investments that are taking place. And without a doubt, you know, I would say as someone who was a legislator at the beginning of the pandemic and, you know, as we've been coming out of it, without a doubt, the cuts to state governments and many of the programming that happens at the local level that comes through the state, there would have been tremendous, significant cuts to those programs had it not been for the American Rescue Plan and the way that, from a state perspective, throughout the budgeting process, we were able to fill in those gaps so that we didn't face those tremendous cuts. And, you know, just as a testament to what that did, we started in 2021 with an unemployment rate of 6%. We're now down to 3.9%. We've created 242,000 jobs in that 2-year period. We have record level new business applications, 296,000 happening here, and have very real prevention of closing of small businesses, being able to keep open those child care providers. And so, you know, that is just one example, but the gifts keep coming to the state of Ohio, and, you know, Ohio is really having its moment, certainly with the CHIPS Act, and Intel gets a lot of the news, but we also had a large $4.4 billion investment from Honda and LG Energy and the production of new batteries for new electric vehicles. So a lot of opportunity that's happening here. Just in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act and the very real implications that it's having not only for how we're investing in the clean energy economy, and, you know, by the way, also creating a lot of opportunities in our rural communities in terms of the investments that are able to be had in climate smart technologies for agricultural uses, opening up pathways for many of our electric cooperatives that serve our rural communities to have access to clean energy technology. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan for our rural communities, just the investment in high-speed internet and broadband, that infrastructure. We have many communities in Ohio that still lack access. Those are tremendous things that are having very real impacts all across the state and not just in our metropolitan areas like here in Central Ohio. In terms of the reduction, the IRA, and the impact it had on health care for Ohioans, you know, closing some of those loopholes for the Affordable Care Act, reducing insulin prices, it really, you know, 2.2 million Ohio residents now directly benefit from that legislation and how it has increased affordability for health care and being able additionally to sign up for the marketplace. You know, if I could just speak to some of the challenges, I think, as we move forward and some things to think about. The two areas to me that are of big concern. One, as we go through the unwinding and the Medicaid redetermination process, we know that many Ohioans are losing health care coverage because of this, particularly children. And I think, you know, we're seeing this in many states across the country, but making sure that we understand the potential unintended consequences for children and children losing access. We do not want to lose ground on how we are ensuring children through that redetermination process. The second piece is in the child care space, we are very grateful in the CHIPS Act that is part of the application creating a plan for child care for those grant awardees and applicants and as a condition of award. What I think we need to be careful about is making sure that the plan, for example, that the Intels come up with in this space, that they are not doing unintentional, perhaps damage to the regional capacity of child care providers and access, that we're not simply, you know, solving one problem by robbing, right, you know, capacity in other ways within the region. So I think that's something to also just be mindful of as we're moving forward with that. And then I think the third thing, you know, because we sit at the State House, and a lot of this money is coming through the state, and certainly a very challenging political climate is, I think, where we've seen the most success in Ohio is really working directly with our local governments, county, local governments, and they've just been so innovative in how they have used a lot of these federal funds, you know, to address the needs of the community. It can be a little bit more challenging when it comes through the state because it gets tied up perhaps in some of the politics, much slower coming to communities as well, and that can be a source of frustration or perhaps not being used in the way that it probably best could be used or as intended. So I think that's something moving forward that consideration has to be given to as well.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate everything you said and done there, and we would love to follow up on the Medicaid redetermination. I spoke about that briefly, you know, in my remarks, and we've been meeting with, and the we in that sentence is us and HHS, the folks at the Center for Medicaid Services, CMS. And one thing that we've heard a lot about is, perhaps the enrollment process for SNAP and for Medicaid. The universe that we're dealing with has very high overlap. So there are some things that can be done to perhaps streamline this process. And I'm glad that folks like yourself are paying attention to what's happening at the state level, and we're trying to work collaboratively with every state government on this. So I welcome your thoughts on what else we need to do here, because it really is front and center. And there's some people who are going to be off because they've graduated. That's great. But I'm equally confident that there are folks, and we've heard a lot from various stakeholder groups about, there's just hard to reach populations. And what I don't want to have happen is you've allowed it to lapse, and then you have your next visit to a healthcare provider is to the ER for something that could have been prevented had you, been signed up.
And I appreciate certainly the work that has been happening in this space. I think what we know from the past is also children in particular become disproportionately impacted when their parents lose coverage. And rightly or wrongly, if they've lost coverage, in most cases the children still are eligible for the coverage, and we don't want those children losing. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Beautiful. And Dr. Forward, the Vice President of the Ohio NAACP, I believe you have that.
Thank you, Doctor, for being here.
Thank you, Director Tom.
Tom.
I know. We've met on several different occasions.
I have a photo with you and Hillary Shelton.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, sir. Yeah. So on behalf of the Ohio Conference of Branches, where former State Senator Tom Roberts serves as our president, first of all, I want to say from a Daytonian perspective, I'm from right down the road in Dayton, Ohio, where Congresswoman Joyce Beatty is also a Daytonian, even though she resides here in Columbus space. Okay, but she is a Daytonian. She resides here in Columbus, but she is a Daytonian. But anyway, we would ask for your help on something, and that is when I think about the Obama-Biden administration. On December 10th, 2015, Obama signed into law the SFA Act, Every Student Succeeds Act. And unfortunately, our Ohio State Board of Education has said that they have set inferior academic expectation goals, 54% for African American students, and 84.5% for white students, which goes totally against the grain. And I know you come from a civil rights background. I've studied you. I've seen a lot of different civil rights work that you did in terms of student, filing lawsuits regarding discrimination in school systems. But when we think about having an expectation for black and brown kids at 54.8% right here in the Buckeye State of Ohio, 84.3%, is a total disgrace to the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education, Title VI of 1964 Civil Rights Act. So I guess what we want to know is how can and what should we do from a Biden-Harris standpoint, to be able to advance or continue with that as a plan to ensure that these types of goals does not spread throughout this nation.
Well, I would strongly urge you to have a conversation with both the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Education and the Civil Rights Division that I had the privilege of leading. My parents always taught me that education was the great equalizer. And while we are almost 70 years removed from Brown versus Board of Education, we still know that there are way too many school districts that are separate and unequal. There are, I've seen things over the last few years that make my blood boil. And some of it's pretty blatant, and some of it is subtle, but no less damaging, and everything in between. The disproportionate assignment of kids of color to away from gifted and talented programs and into detention. And I've been to communities where I just thought this stuff had ended. And so, and this is, your question is right in the heartland of what we just talked about 10, 15 minutes ago about, we've got beaucoup opportunity here, but if our pipeline is springing leaks, then communities aren't going to be able to take full advantage of it. And so, I would urge you to have those conversations with folks at the Department of Education and the Department of Justice, because, again, I had a steady diet of those cases, and they weren't just in Mississippi and Alabama. They were in communities that would have surprised you. So, this is really a front and center moment.
If I could just add too, where funds from the White House have been helpful to us is, so what we know is for all the things that Ms. Ford brought up, Dr. Ford brought up, we know that it's not just pedagogy. It's not just what teachers are teaching in the classroom that affects students. It's the things that lead up to that moment. It's the things that are after that moment, so at home, in the community, and so forth. And so I see Danielle Sidner's here, and she heads up an organization that we created very specifically and exclusively to focus on big ideas at helping families transform and go from, being part of the puzzle. But we're able to fund and invest millions of dollars in Ms. Sidnor's program because we had funds like ARPA funds that allowed us to focus on infrastructure and shift funds to this so that we can begin to take the deep dive in how the county invests in education, how the county invests in families. And so I just want to acknowledge that because when, especially coming out of the pandemic, we had to make those choices. We had to say, okay, we've got funds, but now we don't want to just we just want to stop the bleeding here. We want to begin to think beyond this current need and situation. So it's allowed us to invest and create organizations like Ms. Sidnor's, where their exclusive job is to focus on how to partner as a community to address those issues for the young people that you talked about. And it's really because of the federal dollars that we're able to shift those funds into those creative ideas.
Another build off the federal dollars, but before I begin, you can add me to your list of Daytonians. I grew up in the Dayton area. It is true that the mayor of Cincinnati has a 937 cell phone number. So.
Oh, you're not supposed to tell people that. 513, isn't it?
Yeah. His Ohio knowledge dropping Lorain County.
Impressive.
Pretty good. Just one quick build, and I prefer to hear from the audience members. Teen violence is through the roof. One of the concerning trends out of the pandemic, and the activism from the Biden administration, particularly as it relates to sensible gun laws, enacting the first major piece of sensible gun reform in decades, has really given us the tools to partner with our school board to try and get some of this teen violence under control. So we greatly appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you. There's been a good build up here. Thank you for what you've been doing.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear more.
My name is Danielle Sidnor, and I am leading Rise Together Innovation Institute. And I also want to introduce to some and reintroduce to others Kathleen Clyde, who is her first day is today. We're out, and about in the community already. She's my Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives. But to what Commissioner Boyce just talked about, the Institute is focused on implementing big ideas to disrupt structural racism and reduce poverty in Franklin County. And something that you talked about, Leader, about the fact that the overlap between people that are on Medicaid and that are on other types of government services. We had a recent investment that we're partnering with an organization called Smart Columbus on through the use of American Rescue Plan to build a community information exchange, which essentially would help to reduce the amount of time that someone spends simply navigating getting access to resources. Our county is a leader in this already and working on, through our Deputy County Administrator Bibbins, the front door, one door policy within the county to kind of investigate, make it easier. If you come in, no matter which organization you come into, you're going to need multiple services. Why can't you just come through one place? And so doing the same thing through our Health and Human Services and community-based organizations to say, if I'm looking for housing or food or shelter, I should be able to go to one place, tell that story one time, and that organization can tell that story to the 5 others that I need to get those same benefits from. But if we didn't have dollars like ARPA, it'd be very expensive to be able to do this with just looking at our general funds. And then we believe these are transformative projects that we can convince even our business community and others to partner with us in these kinds of investments. So we appreciate, the Biden-Harris administration. And I think other parts of the infrastructure bill and others will be the same types of things that we can continue to kind of layer things off of this kind of technology platform that we'll develop.
Oh, that's great. What are your funding sources?
So currently our funding sources are from the county. The city has also committed, we're still waiting on their dollars, but we know they're coming in. The county's, but yeah, the county is our primary and sole funder at this point. But again, it's giving us a chance to really build some runway. And one of the reasons I came down to Columbus from Cleveland is because you did have a county government, in my opinion, who was on the forefront of something, and they weren't reactive and waiting until after the murder of George Floyd or the pandemic to start this work. They'd begun this work before that, and so I think that's an indication that they're committed to it and that they're willing to put the dollars in to give us the opportunity to build the kind of infrastructure that we need so we can go out and raise dollars from other places as well.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Ford. I really appreciate your presence here and what you continue to do. And I got to spend time earlier with President Watson and the work she's doing to make sure there's access in the trades for pipelines of people of color to punch their ticket to the middle class is one of those many moments that I take away from today's visit.
On behalf of our mayor in the city of Dayton, Mayor Jeffrey J. Mills, we want to say thank you for the nearly 130 million that came to Dayton, Ohio, and about 54 million of those dollars are going to our neighborhoods. So, so on behalf of our city, bringing those kinds of dollars into our community to be able to build infrastructure in our neighborhoods and job opportunities. We say thank you.
Great.
How has Dayton infiltrated Columbus so far? There's an issue here. What's happening?
Wow, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, my mom's on your side. She's always trying to get me to move back to Dayton. So.
Isabella?
Story, question?
Yes.
Mayor?
All right. Oh, thank you, Mayor.
So Jack Bradley, Mayor of Lorain, Ohio, and first of all, I want to thank the Biden-Harris administration for inviting me to the White House last September. It was a great trip, a great sharing opportunity, and I'm glad that the Biden-Harris administration selected the state of Ohio as the first state in the nation to be represented at the White House, because we are first in the nation. But
can the two of you agree on that?
But that was a good trip for me, because HUD Secretary Fudge talked with us, and after she got done talking, I handed her our plan for our Choice Neighborhoods grant. And I said, Secretary Fudge, we really need your help. We've got a community, 30% Hispanic, and we have neighborhoods that need HUD funding. And on December 22nd, I got the good news that we were selected as one of 9 cities in the United States to receive a Choice Neighborhoods Planning Grant.
Great. That's awesome.
And I'm not supposed to say this, but it's our hope that we're going to get the $50 million implementation grant. So again, without the Biden-Harris administration doing things for even smaller cities in the state of Ohio, we wouldn't be surviving. And our city appreciates what you've done for us. We've had that opportunity to hire more police officers. When I started, we had 90 police officers. Now we have 110. We've been able to implement a program called SOS, which is Serving Our Streets. We didn't want to call it a youth violence intervention program. We wanted to serve our youth in our community. And through grants and using ARPA money, the City of Elyria and the City of Lorain are joining together with our Urban League to do this program. So again, the things that the Biden-Harris administration have done for us since I've been in office are remarkable, and we just hope they continue. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service. I know you don't get rich as the mayor of Lorain, or if you do, you should be indicted. You know?
End of career, not
No, I mean, I really appreciate, I loved my service in local government. You can see the fruits of your labor, and when you have a partner in Washington that can help you, you can do things quicker. And that's game-changing, because you know your community's best. And I'm so glad that you're here, by the way. Long time no see.
Just a quick button on that comment. I completely agree with the mayor. And Cincinnati used ARP dollars in a similar way. And I just get so frustrated when I hear the partisan attacks about Democrats not supporting law enforcement and not funding police. But when you look at it, it's President Biden's ARP money that funded police during the pandemic. And it's Democratic mayors across the country that are funding police and making sure we're prioritizing.
Yeah. Hey, Mayor, can I ask one follow-up question? Did you have difficulty hiring the 20? Because I've spoken to other mayors who've been having some challenges in retaining and recruiting police officers.
So, when I got elected, I said, I don't care if I get reelected. Maybe I should retire anyhow. But I said, we're going to have to do something to attract police officers. So what I did is I established a longevity program where if you have 20 years of service with the City of Lorain or any other police department, you get 20% in longevity pay on your 20th year and going forward. We started at the third year where you get 2%, and then every year you get another percent of longevity pay. And that has helped us to recruit new police officers who are looking for some kind of incentive to stay with the city.
Yeah.
And also for some experienced police officers. And then if you work for a different police department and you wanted to interview in Lorain, we'll pay you for that service that you had in another community with our longevity program. And I haven't bankrupted the city yet, so I hope I don't.
Yes. Well, thank you. That's a very frequently asked question about recruitment. So that's a very creative strategy.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor.
From one mayor to another.
Just real quick to piggyback off a comment that Mayor Perez just made in terms of support for police. Here in the state of Ohio, the state just released retention grants. So the Biden administration continues to help with retention for safety services for both police and fire. And on the city of Lima, our firefighters and our police officers all received a $4,000 retention grant apiece. And so thank you for that. One of the things that I said when we were all in D.C. last year was the thing that is unique, and it's been said in this room, but I think I should say it again, about the American Rescue Plan Act dollars was the genius of the federal government to send those directly to the local level. As mayors, as state legislatures, as county government commissioners, we go to bed with these issues and we wake up with these issues. And we know, and I loved hearing Mayor Perez be able to talk about how he can leverage dollars from other programs to do what he knows needs to be done for his community. So again, thank you for thinking of that. And one of the things that we've been able to do in the city of Lima with our American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and just to put it in context, we received $26 million. That is 26 times our annual CDBG allocation. So this is a generation changer for our community. Wow. And we've been able to invest those dollars specifically in 3 areas. Youth services, we created a program called Gen Next, where we provided pre-employment services for individuals specifically ages 16 to 24-year-olds with no college degree. And also connected those individuals to our largest employers. We just had that program this past summer. 50% of the youth that participated in that program are now working full-time for some of those industries. Those are our hospital industries. We also have a Procter & Gamble facility in Lima, a Ford engine plant facility in Lima. So we're talking about good paying jobs. The other thing that we've been able to do is particularly with respect to housing. We've invested a lot of dollars in home ownership counseling. We partnered with a national organization that is the #1 HUD counseling provider in the United States. And since April, we've been able to start 300 individuals on the path to home ownership with those dollars, and also provide up to $15,000 down payment assistance to get individuals in homes. So those are just 2 examples of the programs that we're doing. And again, thank you, because again, that money it will be a generation changer in our community.
I really appreciate your granularity there. It's, I mean, that's significant.
Hello, Regina Fuentes. I'm actually an educator here in the state of Ohio.
Thank you for your service.
I got invited last year to attend to represent the teachers in the state of Ohio. And I just want to acknowledge and show my appreciation of having a president that is so pro public education and so pro just looking out for the educators in the United States. Day to day, I'm in the classroom and I'm doing the job that, you know, so many people don't recognize and so many people don't realize. And it just touches my heart to know that there are programs out there that will help fund teachers who are, we talked about earlier, being in debt and having problems with, you know, finding housing and being able to afford staying in the classroom. So knowing that President Biden and his administration have done things to help educators to be able to get forgivable loans and have funding in public education has really been beneficial. And I'm just very thankful to be in the room with so many people who are actively trying and working so hard to keep public education important and vital in our society.
What grade level are you at?
I teach high school.
High school?
Yes, high school English here in Columbus City Schools. This is my 25th year teaching.
Wow.
What's your, do you have a summer reading list?
Yes.
What are the books you're...
Currently, right now, we're reading, well, I have 3 preps. So we're reading Born a Crime, Trevor Noah. We're also getting ready to read The Crucible.
Okay.
And yes, and yeah, that's a good one. And let's see, for the, Fallen Angels, Walter D. Myers.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yes.
Do you see a lot more students during and post-pandemic who are confronting mental health issues?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it makes my job so much more challenging because as a teacher I have to wear many hats. You know, I just had a student just on Friday who right in the middle of class just got up and walked out, but he did come back, and when he came back he was just so emotionally distraught because all of these things are happening in his life, and you know, all I could do was just sit there and hold his hands and talk to him, you know. But that's the part of education that people don't get to see, is that we have to take those times then to, you know, be the mom, be the counselor. We're not trained to do any of that, But on top of everything else that we're asked to do, those are the extra little things that we have to do. And we're willing to do it. You know, we're here to do it, and we love what we do, and we just need the support.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boy, oh boy.
We've got time for one more.
Wish I could read.
I didn't realize I'd be the
I'm
last
getting that
one.
Trevor Noah book. I'm ordering that tonight.
I had to
Thank
read
you.
like Watership Down or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
My daughter's reading the Trevor Noah book right now. So my name is Andy Beck, and I am also not an elected official. I'm a physician. I'm a pediatrician at Cincinnati Children's, and so
thank you for coming.
Hearing
Number one in the country, Cincinnati Children's.
That's right. Right, number one. That's
FYI.
right.
Are you from Dayton?
I am not. It's funny.
Dr. Fuller had texted me, asked me to ask that question of every
my
witness
father
here today.
did live there for about 2 years when he was age 4, so that's
Take
something.
it. Yeah.
But I think the comments we just heard from the teacher and from many of the elected officials, I think, really resonate with what we see every day in healthcare. And I think, Director, you termed Tom, you termed the ecosystem concept earlier in our time together today, and that's something that I think we see all the time. It's the same situation that you referenced, that the patients that we care for, the families that we see, their health is affected by anything and everything in their surroundings. And there's this concept of health in all policies that really comes into play in the work that we do, that those policies that affect infrastructure, those policies that affect housing quality, those policies that affect economic opportunity for parents all have tremendous impact on kids, and that's the population that we serve. In Cincinnati, we see tremendous variability that is remnant of the destruction from years ago in health outcomes. They're paralleled by educational outcomes. And so I think by developing an ecosystem of public interest doctors and teachers and nurses and social workers, we're trying to figure out how to eliminate those inequities that I think are so ever present. And fortunately, the policies that have been referenced today, I think, can help move us in that direction and ideally bring us together in that ecosystem of health promotion. So thank you for coming to our
Well, I'm inspired that you're here. I'm inspired that everyone is here. I appreciate, you probably have a busy practice, and the fact that you're up here. I used to run the legal clinics at Maryland Law School when my kids were really young, and we had a bunch of folks who would present at ERs because they had asthma. And Baltimore is one of the lead paint capitals of America, regrettably. And, you know, we can keep bringing them back to the ER, or we could address the underlying housing issue and the broader issue of you're living in poverty. And until we address those issues holistically and understand the social determinants of health, you're going to continue to be way too busy treating symptoms, but having limited success at getting at the root causes of your business.
The current asthma hospitalization rate in Cincinnati is 8 times the national average. We have a multi-sector group that's come together from the city, from legal aid, from our health departments, our building departments, to try and beat the national average by 10%. So I think we can do it. It's going to take some time, though.
You know, all these issues are interrelated. You know, our asthma rates have been significantly impacted by the wildfires in Canada and the smog that we were dealing with throughout the summer. So it goes back to climate, it goes back to the social determinants of health, but ultimately I do think a well-funded ecosystem that's cross-disciplinary is needed moving forward.
Well, and that's what, there's a lot of folks in the administration that are working on imploding stovepipes. And because that's, we tend to think of these things separately. We have a health and human services and a labor department you know, people's problems aren't neatly compartmentalized.
Right.
And that's, I think, the sectors and the communities that build ecosystems, you know, where you really are imploding those stovepipes are the ecosystems and communities that can have the greatest success.
But there's nothing quite like federal dollars to incentivize people to work together. So your money has been very helpful in incentivizing people to convene.
Well, and we were very intentional about that. You know, we gave out grants to help communities expand employment opportunities for returning citizens. And one of the explicit requirements was we want you to work together. Mm-hmm. And there was one city that shall go unnamed, not in Ohio, that is near and dear to my heart that didn't get a grant. And I didn't get involved in the scoring process because I wanted to make sure that it was, you know, done by the folks that are best suited to do that. But after it was done, I said, like, why didn't they get it? They said, well, the east side of the city submitted one grant and the other side of the city submitted another grant, notwithstanding, you know, your 20-point font about, you know, we want people to start working together. And, you know, the most ROI we will get from all of these historic investments will be in communities that have figured that out. And I've seen today just remarkable examples of folks coming together. Communities that historically, you know, haven't been as together on some of these issues. But, you know, I'm very optimistic leaving as we prepare to, you know, come to an end here today. I've seen so many examples of leadership at a local level, leadership at an NGO level, partnership. Those are the keys to success. And I leave you where I started, which is this is a moment of unprecedented opportunity. I don't think we will have this level of opportunity to do things again. And we're barely scratching the surface in some of these investments. So we're not in the bell lap of this road race. And so let's continue to do what we have been doing. I'm really, again, as I think the mayor said or the commissioner said, you know, I really believe, as someone who worked in local government, that I've never seen a president with greater respect for and investment in the success of city and county governments. And the best evidence of that is the American Rescue Plan. You are in the best position to decide what's best for you. If you need 20 new police officers, that's your choice. If you want to do something different, that's your choice. And that's why communities are thriving. So really, really appreciate everybody's presence, everyone's serial activism. My late mother used to say, everything happens for a reason. I'm so glad you are mayor. And
yeah, I would hate Congress, man. That was. So we are a little worried about the government shutting down. Are we? Is that? I mean, I hate to ask a political question, but there are real consequences to. That's real. Yeah, there's real.
No, I don't know the answer to that question for sure. I mean, we have certainly, you know, every day Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and everyone in our administration wake up asking, how can we help people today? That's what it should be about. And I have no idea where they will go other than, you know, there's a small number of people on the far right that have oversized authority in that caucus. And so that's why I just can't, I
want to offer to help because
idea.
I met with the police chief this morning, and there are real consequences to public safety because we have intertwined our local public safety with the federal ATF and crime gun intelligence units. And, you know, if that goes away for an extended period of time, it'll be really quite challenging.
Oh, I mean, the implications of government shutdowns are far-ranging. Ask a Social Security recipient.
Yeah.
You know, ask someone who uses national parks. I mean, there's just so many ramifications. And I was labor secretary in 2013 when Ted Cruz shut the government down. Mm-hmm. And it was a terrible experience for a lot of people, and they gained nothing from it. But
Mayor, for what it's worth, I ask my wife this question every single day. My wife's a congresswoman. And I say, "Are you guys going to shut down? Do you know yet?" So I'll let you know. I'll give you the heads up.
Yeah.
Hey, it's coming, Mayor. It's coming.
I have a feeling she's not so sure either. Yeah.
But thank you
Well,
so
again,
much for being here.
Isabella, thank you. And thank you to our local government partners. It's great to be here. You're always welcome in the West Wing. Okay?